Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Thursday, December 28th, 2023, almost the end of the year. Scott Horton joins us now. Scott, it's a pleasure to have you on once a week, and I thank you for all your time and all of your insight in 2023. The viewers of this show, thank you. You are one of the fan favorites, and I hope we can continue our collaboration of analyzing the evils of war in 2024.
Thank you, Judge. Good to be with you as always.
Okay. Why do presidents kill?
Well, I don't know. On a personal level, you know what? Here's what it really comes down to, right? Because never mind the personal level. It's incentives, right? This is what they call public choice theory, which says there is no real national interest. There's just the individual interests of the people in charge and what they think is good for them. And so, R.W. Apple, who was a very famous, a longtime reporter for the New York Times, back when H.W. Bush launched his aggressive war, completely illegal aggressive war against Panama in 1989, R.W. Apple said, yeah, see, this is a right, R-I-T-E, like it's some from Solomon's temple and some flaming sword or some crap from mythology. This is a right that American presidents must go through to shed blood. You're not a real president until you kill somebody. It's like getting made in the mob or something. This is our security force, Judge. These are the people who rule over us.
And one of the reasons I would submit they do it is because they know they will always get away with it. I mean, Barack Obama used drones to murder 2 Americans, Anwar al-Awlaki and his son, while they were seated in a open air cafe in Yemen, neither ever having been charged with a crime, though both of them surrounded by 12 CIA agents the last 48 hours of their lives, neither even the object of an arrest warrant, and yet both murdered. And Obama knew that there would be no personal consequences to him because of our system, that the president can commit crimes while he's president, but if it's done in furtherance of some arguable foreign policy goal, there will be no consequences. So they kill because there's a political interest in doing it, and they kill because they can get away with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and think about the position that H.W. Bush was in. He wasn't a right-wing conservative, nationalist type or patriot type like Ronald Reagan. He was the compromise. He was the rhino that was brought in as vice president for the acceptable ticket in 1980, right? So how was he supposed to live up to Ronald Reagan? In fact, Bill Hicks, the great comedian, had a whole bit. In fact, George Carlin did too, both of them, about that. They called him the wimp president. It was the cover of Time magazine or the cover of Newsweek magazine. That is H.W. Bush, a big wimp. And so he had to kill people. Then here comes Bill Clinton. Well, Bill Clinton was a draft dodger. And that was one of the big controversies of his candidacy, was that he escaped off to Oxford while all these other guys got fed into the meat grinder. And he had to try to live that down somehow. And he had picked a big fight about gays in the military and all that. So he had to act tough. He had to escalate the air war over Iraq. He had to intervene like a tough guy in Bosnia. And in fact, I have all these quotes I'm collecting in the new book. They talk about Bosnia and Kosovo as this is Bill Clinton's chance for his generation to go to war, especially those who are trying to make up for the fact that they dodged the draft in Vietnam. They want some of that glory. This has nothing to do with the poor Bosnians or the poor Serbs or the poor Kosovar Albanians caught in the crossfire. It's all about Bill. And in fact, Judge, now that I'm ranting about that, 1999, Kosovo, Madeleine Albright tried to get us into that war very hard, but she's just the Secretary of State. She doesn't command armed forces, but you know who does? Hillary Clinton, the scorned, separated wife. And this is just in the aftermath of the Monica Lewinsky scandal and President Clinton's acquittal in the U.S. Senate. And this story is told by Gail Sheehy, who wrote an authorized biography of Hillary. And she talked about it with Stone Phillips on NBC News, and she wrote all about it and about how Hillary herself took credit for forcing Bill Clinton to start the air war against Serbia. And it was and this is according to Sheehy firsthand, that this was her condition for talking to Bill again.
Right.
After
Well,
the
remember what Bill did, Bill Clinton, the day of or the day after, depends on which side of the time line you were on, his infamous and publicly televised interrogation before a grand jury. In order to get everybody's mind off of that, he bombed a pharmaceutical plant and killed some janitors.
Yeah.
In Bosnia. I mean, if that's not murder, I don't know what is. It's the same as what Obama did. The reason I use the Obama example because they were American citizens.
Yeah. Well, hey, look, as long as we're on Bill Clinton here,
go ahead.
I'm the best Bill Clinton hater out of everybody. So I like to, point out all these things. You're absolutely right, but it's double and worse than that because he bombed the pharmaceutical plant, which they, Rush Limbaugh said, oh, it was an aspirin factory. No, it was an antibiotics factory, and tens of thousands of people died of preventable deaths because of that. And they claimed it was a chemical weapons factory, which was a complete hoax. That was in Sudan. And he also fired the missiles at empty Al-Qaeda training camps in Afghanistan at that time, and then left it at that. But that was to distract from, you're right, Monica Lewinsky's grand jury testimony. But that was
his own testimony
of 98. But then in December of 98, the day after the judiciary had voted the Judiciary Committee in the House had voted the articles of impeachment. That was on a Friday. They were supposed to begin debating the articles on Saturday. And Bill Clinton launched Operation Desert Fox, his massive bombing campaign against Iraq, which had already been disarmed.
I mean,
by
part of this is the War Powers Resolution, a terrible piece of legislation enacted during the Nixon administration, which Nixon vetoed because he felt it crimped his style. It should have been vetoed because it's unconstitutional, because it passes authority for declaring war from the Congress to the president, as long as the declaration is only for 90 days. So under the War Powers Resolution, any president can start any mini war he wants and send the military anywhere he or she wants for 90 days and has to tell the Congress. And then Congress can either say no, bring them home, or yes, keep it up. But he's home or she's home free for that first 90 days. This was congressional reaction to Nixon's bombing of Cambodia. And of course, like a lot of things Congress does, it makes it worse. Clinton knew that he could do that constitutionally, unconstitutional, morally reprehensible and criminal, but under American federal law, perfectly legal.
Right. And see, here's the thing, and we could go on about W. Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, all of them and their,
well, even Trump boasted about using drones to kill an Iranian general, just evaporated him and his entourage while he was peacefully on his way to lunch.
Yeah, and look, his trade representative
in Iraq, and supposed ally of ours.
And his trade representative boasted to the New York Times, Pete Navarro, that the reason they kept the Yemen war going and vetoed 2 War Powers resolutions, historic ones actually against it, trying to restrict that war, was because they were doing a favor for Raytheon. And they weren't even shy about it at all. Right. That was why. Trump doesn't even know where Yemen is or care about that. But if his guys say we got to buy off the military industrial complex with some money, and he identified them as such himself, then that's policy. And they kept the genocide going. And that was a real war against the civilian population, that country. The entire 4 years that he was in power, war that, yes, he inherited from Barack Obama. It was absolutely the worst thing he did. And as he said, as his own guys said, they did it for their own personal interest. But here's the point is, while we look at all these public choice perverse incentives behind why the presidents make these decisions, which is only, of course, one small part of it. It's all these institutional forces acting on them and so forth that they're giving into and that they're in concert with. What's lost? The national interest of the United States of America. What did America get out of the war in Vietnam? Nothing. What did we get out of the war in Afghanistan or Iraq or Libya, Syria, Yemen, any of our special operations forces traipsing throughout North Africa? Nobody with a straight face could say that that stuff has kept us safe. That Iraq War 1 or Bill Clinton's Iraq War 1.5, which everyone knows. Everyone knows this. Judge Ron Paul's the one who made it famous, but this is common knowledge now, household terminology type thing. It was Bill Clinton, bombing Iraq from bases in Saudi that provoked Ronald Reagan's mercenaries and Bill Clinton's mercenaries into turning on us and knocking the towers down in the first place.
Correct.
None of those hijackers, Judge, were from the axis of evil countries, Iran, Iraq, or Syria. They were all from Saudi and Egypt and Yemen and Lebanon, sock puppet states of America. And that was what they hated about us, was that we were too close to their governments, that our empire backed up and supported their merciless totalitarian dictatorships that they live under. Not that I would prefer whatever revolution they had in mind, but they would have never succeeded in that anyway. But the point is, that was why they were angry at us, because the United States of America under H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton especially had made the United States of America the enemies of them. And it doesn't justify what they did any more than what they did to us on September 11th justifies what George Bush and Barack Obama and Donald Trump and Joe Biden did in response since then.
You're preaching to the choir here. This is beautifully articulated, and is a version of history that the government, of course, doesn't want you to hear. Professor Sachs, who was on with us earlier today, has a brilliant, long, wonderful piece called American Foreign Policy is a Scam Based on Corruption, which we posted at judgenap.com, which articulates that every major post 9/11, this is not to say it didn't happen pre 9/11, but he's only analyzing post 9/11. So every major foreign policy decision made by every single president in the past 23 years has been an act of corruption and had nothing whatsoever to do with American national security. You are taking it to before 9/11 and arguing so persuasively, my dear friend, that 9/11 is a consequence of these decisions, and surely it is. Let's bring it up to date. Why did Joe Biden bomb Iraq on Christmas Day last weekend?
Because he is retaliating, they say, and I guess credibly, against a Shiite militia called Kataib Hezbollah, which is, of course, close to the government that the United States put in power in Iraq War II. And we still have guys embedded there in the name of fighting ISIS, who would be the bin Ladenites, the radical on the radical Sunni side. But the party in power and their allied militias are the ones who've been striking at America right now. You can see why ISIS would stay out or even frame the Shiites if they could in order to provoke a war between their two enemies there. But this is what, when people think back to Iraq War II, 2003 through 8, this is what all those soldiers and Marines died for, was to fight a civil war for the Shiite side, to cleanse the capital city of the Sunni Arabs in a sectarian cleansing campaign and give it to the Shiites.
But
and so we have the same problem.
How profoundly unlawful is it, Scott? A, for us to be physically present in the military in a country that doesn't want us. B, to kill third parties in that country against the will of the government of that country. These are major war crimes that are being committed by the United States. And Joe Biden just did it on Christmas. And then Chris put the full screen up, didn't even answer reporters' questions, but his National Security Council person released this nonsense. The president places no higher priority than the protection of American personnel serving in harm's way. The United States will act at a time and in a manner of our choosing should these attacks continue. So we put them there illegally, and because somebody attacked them, we're gonna target third parties that we think might be paying for the attack.
Yeah. Well, and of course, he could say it with a straight face because he's Joe Biden. It's sort of like when W. Bush says something, people just go, I don't know, maybe that's the best he can figure out how to say out loud. But he could say that with a straight face because he's doddering old Joe Biden. That, our troops, well, they're in harm's way. So, and it's true that they have been under attack.
What the hell are they doing there?
In Syria as well. But of course, that's right. He's begging the entire question. Why are they there? But here's the thing, Judge. I'll tell you why they're there. It's because of Israel. See, America's foreign policy post-Iraq War I is all tied up with Israel. Because when, H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton both at the urging of Colin Powell especially, they wanted to push for this two-state solution. And they ended up doing the Oslo deal, said they were going to do this peace process. In 1993, they started the peace process to have a two-state solution so the Palestinians would have independence more or less in a sort of state minus, they called it, but a hell of a lot better than the current occupation for sure. But then Yitzhak Rabin was killed, assassinated by a Netanyahu fan in 1995, and Shimon Peres was his successor and was essentially ineffectual on that issue and just launched a war in Lebanon and then was gone. And then in came Benjamin Netanyahu, Judge, in 1996, the first time he was prime minister. And a guy who ended up being Dick Cheney's guy, David Wormser, who along with Richard Pearl and Douglas Feith both signed it, but it was Wormser that wrote it. It's called A Clean Break, a new strategy for securing the realm. And it says, here's what we're going to do so that we do not have to implement Oslo, so that we can get away with not giving the Palestinians independence. We need to take pressure off of our northern flank where we feel pressure from Hezbollah, which is backed by Syria and Iran. And we identify Syria as the keystone in the arc of Iranian power. And then here's the crazy, stupid, ridiculous part, Judge. Bear with me here now. It's not my fault this doesn't make sense, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to get rid of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, Sunni Saddam, secular Sunni Saddam, sitting on the Ba'athist sort of socialist fascist dictatorship, minority dictatorship in Iraq, holding the Shiite supermajority down. But don't worry, this is a brilliant plan, see, because we're going to have the cousin of the king of Jordan come in, and because of his royal bloodline, the Shiites will obey his every word, which is complete pipe dream crazy. The Shiites do not revere the Hashemites in any way whatsoever. And that is not how Iraq War II worked out. This was the same thing behind Iraq War II. David Wormser and Richard Pearl and Douglas Feith were three of the most influential neoconservatives who helped to lie us into Iraq War II. And this was the strategy, Judge, that by getting rid of Saddam, they would empower Turkey and Jordan in Iraq, and they would lord their Hashemite blood over the Iraqis, Shiites, who would force Hezbollah to stop being friends with Iran. And then that way, and with Syria. And then that way, the Israelis wouldn't have to give up a Palestinian state on the West Bank. So then what happened? You know the history. America fought Iraq War II, and as I just said, empowered the Shiites, put the Shiites in charge, and loyal to Iran. Well, that didn't work. That backfired. So then what did they do? You'll remember 10 years ago, they insisted that if we put Iran up 2 pegs in Baghdad, we got to take them down a peg in Damascus. And that was why they backed al-Qaeda. They turned around and they backed al-Qaeda in Iraq, in Syria, which blew up into the ISIS caliphate by 2014, that they then had to launch Iraq War III, again on behalf of the Iranian-backed Shiites, that they wish they hadn't backed in Iraq War II, to destroy the caliphate that they built to get revenge against them for winning Iraq War II.
And it doesn't matter.
And that's why, Judge, wait, let me finish. I'm almost done. And that's why we have troops in Syria and Iraq right now, because by backing the caliphate and then necessitating Hezbollah and Iran and Russia all coming to Assad's aid in Syria, we made Assad more dependent on Iran and more dependent on Hezbollah than ever before. And now America, at Israel's behest over the last 25 years, has completed what they call the Shiite Crescent Alliance from Tehran all the way to Beirut. And that's why Americans have to stay camped out at Al-Tanf in Syria forever to try to block that so-called land bridge that the USA built for them, that George W. Bush and Barack Obama built for them.
And it doesn't matter which party is in power because the ideology is the same. I'm going to let you save your voice for a few minutes because you were talking about Iran and play a clip of Lindsey Graham. You can imagine what he says, and then Professor Sachs's response. It actually starts with me introducing the Lindsey Graham clip to Professor Sachs, and then his response. I expect you'll agree with everything Professor Sachs said. Here's Lindsey Graham at his worst. I know you're on vacation, but this will raise your blood pressure. Here's what Senator Lindsey Graham says. You can imagine what's coming if you haven't seen this.
No,
We should,
but it's I know everything is possible out of that man's mouth.
right. Here's what he says we should do next.
Secretary Austin and the Biden administration is failing our troops in the field. I admire him. He's a patriot, but he's not doing a good job protecting the soldiers. I asked him a couple of months ago, Joey, what you were talking about. Is there a red line? Would you tell our enemies publicly that if you kill an American, we're coming after you? Without Iran, there are no Houthis. The Houthis are completely backed by Iran. I've been saying for 6 months now, hit Iran. They have oil fields out in the open. They have the Revolutionary Guard headquarters you can see from space. Blow it off the map.
Start World War III, Senator.
The man's an idiot and always has been, I'm sorry to say, for as long as he's been saying such things. It's almost like a photoshopped video, because you could go back and find Lindsey Graham saying hit him, bomb him, about just about any place, anywhere in the world. That's his one mode of operation. You don't have to even know exactly who we're supposed to be bombing on this particular day. That's the whole idea in this guy's head. And he's, of course, one of the disastrous authors of American foreign policy of the last 20 years. Take out his record, look at every single war that he has called for, look at all this spending. He's a disaster, and he should be apologizing to the American people rather than calling for more war.
I'm sure you agree.
Well, look, and more specifically, he might as well be the Ayatollah's slave. He might as well be a secret agent of the Shiite theocracy in Iran, accomplishing their goals all this time. The only competition would be if he was the secret agent of Osama bin Laden, who helped him radicalize however many hundreds of thousands over on the other side of this war. He's brought absolute chaos to the region, and including, as far as Mali and as far as the Philippines. He's, just like Senator and Vice President Joe Biden and Senator McCain, in on every bit of this, going back the entire time. One of the worst hawks on all this. The reason that Barack Obama, it's all his responsibility. He could have faced them down. I talk about in my book how he could have. But one of the major reasons that he gave in and escalated, tripled the war in Afghanistan when he knew it could never win, that he'd just be throwing those boys away, again, for his own selfish interests, was because he was going to be stuck with McCain and Graham. The only other option, you just saw it, Judge, was lose and leave and our sock puppets government falls. There was no path to victory in Afghanistan, period. And so that was the political choice. Is Barack Obama going to look in Iraq War II? America, again, won the war for the supermajority, who then told us, thanks, now get the hell out. So they could at least sort of kind of call that a victory. Right? In Afghanistan, the government that they had built was absolutely doomed and was going absolutely nowhere. And so that was his political choice. Is he going to let Afghanistan fall apart and let Lindsey Graham and John McCain crucify him from the Senate? Or is he going to escalate the war and what? Just kick the can down the road? Make it someone else's problem later, which is exactly what he succeeded in doing. And the outcome was exactly the same as if he had just gone ahead and withdrawn the troops in 2009, when he had the political capital to do it, and when he had just beaten Senator McCain by 10 points a year before, and could have said, that's why I'm the president and you're the senator, and the decision is mine to make, not yours, and we're leaving. And instead, he gave in and he rolled over again for his own interests, because Lindsey Graham, because he wasn't man enough to take on Lindsey Graham, Judge, and duttering old John McCain, who couldn't find Afghanistan on a map, but he gave in to them. And what happened? They killed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of innocent people, and including about 15 or 1,700 of the American soldiers that died in that war, died in Obama's surge.
Well, Scott, you are terrific. Your knowledge of the history and your ability to marshal facts in a compelling way is second to none. Thank you very much for this. Thank you for being my friend, for being a friend of the show. We look forward to continuing to do this on a weekly basis in 2024. The fans love you. I love your analysis. I also love your personal courage. Thank you, my dear friend.
Thank you so much, Judge. Can I say one thing here real quick at the end as a personal favor? I
Sure.
just interviewed Roger Waters again today, the legendary lead singer of Pink Floyd, who's great on Palestine. And he played his brand new song for me. And it's going to be the world premiere of Roger Waters' new song. I'm going to play it today on Anti-War Radio. That's 2:30 Pacific time on KPFK 90.7 FM in Los Angeles and at kpfk.org.
You got it, my man. We'll be listening. Thank you. All
Thank
the
you
best.
so much, Judge.
Happy New Year to you. We'll see you
You too.
next week.
Bye.
Wow. Talk about Scott on fire. There he was. Coming up at 3 o'clock Eastern, Karen Kwiatkowski. Why is government evil? Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.